Dear colleagues, it is my pleasure to present the joint findings of the research project conducted by the scholars of Borys Grinchenko Kyiv University, Digital Formats of Learning Outcomes Assessment in the COVID-19 Paradigm survey study. Of course, any study of alternations in the educational activities or educational skills sphere are informed by the economic and job market challenges imposed by the global economy, imposed onto the global economy by the COVID-19 pandemic paradigm. Those challenges are multidimensional, and they inform the necessary adjustments and necessary changes in the skills that are derivative of the emergency digitization measures. In the educational sphere, of course, the necessary adjustments that have been informed by the pandemic are the adaptation of existing social and learning scenarios to digital, remote, and blended formats, the upgrade of digital competence and digital literacy of all participants of the social and educative interaction, and the activation of complex interdisciplinary skill sets, otherwise latent or underutilized in education and in any form of social interaction. Assessment poses as such form of a social interaction in and outside of the educational environment. Therefore, the overall objective of this particular study is to profile and evaluate the practices of two contrastive modes of learning outcomes assessment in higher education, the traditional or summative and formative, as implemented in the timeframe of emergency digitization learning measures in the years 2020 and 2021 at Borys Grinchenko Kyiv University. That is the sample university for the study. And you can see the design, the overall design of the study on the slide. The methodological premise for assessment and evaluation of formative and summative assessment as a necessary literacy, as a necessary skill in the educational process is informed by the interconnectivity of various types of digital literacy frameworks that are functional nowadays in the European Union. That would be the UNESCO ICT Competency Framework for in-service teachers, the European e-competence framework guideline for professionals, and the Digital Competence 2020 framework, the so-called DigComp, and its derivatives, and the next generation of this framework, the DigComp Edu and the DigComp 2021. The three main purposes for assessment are described as follows. Assessment as learning and assessment for learning are the formative types of assessment, whereas assessment of learning, of course, it occurs when teachers use evidence of students' learning to make judgments on their achieved goals. That would be the summative format of assessment. For the purposes of this study, we are comparing and contrasting how both these assessment formats are being adjusted to the emergency digitization measures. The typology of assessment activities undergoes qualitative transformation enhanced by the emergency digital learning measures in terms of techniques that serve as digital equivalents to real-time educational practices for measurable evaluation of performance results and competence formation on each tier of learning goals achievement. On the slide, you can see the evolution of the Bloom's taxonomy of learning goals as applied to the emergency digitization measures and as applied to the dichotomy of formative and summative assessment in the digital realm. The primary method of the study that our research team has employed was a questionnaire, a survey. So the questionnaire overview comprises of such elements. There were 14 questions overall. They span three specific dimensions that were assessed. The overall experiences and techniques of learning outcomes assessment in the emergency digital format. We evaluated the experiences, the comparison and contrast of traditional and formative assessment in the digital learning context, and the ICT tools and skills implemented through different forms of assessment in the digital learning context. Overall, there were 188 respondents. They were in-service educators and senior year students, or the so-called pre-service educators, and the sample spanned 3 types of programs at Borys Grinchenko Kyiv University: the liberal arts majors, the education majors, and the computer science programs. Dimension 1 of our inquiry disclosed the overall experiences and techniques of learning outcomes assessment in the emergency digital format. And the proportional number of respondents predominantly implemented both formats of assessment in the emergency digitalization paradigm. The regular assessment and the formative assessment were used proportionately. The following ways of assessment have been implemented specifically for the COVID blended learning formats. Blended assessment format, both synchronous and asynchronous, dominates. Asynchronous electronic format of assessment, the preparation of tasks in the learning management system like Moodle or Google Class, and their grading later, that was utilized subsequently less. The changes in the workflow and procedures of assessment have been dynamically evaluated by the stakeholders, by our respondents, in the following way. 56% of respondents testified that there was a transition to the use of alternative tools for assessment, for assessing students. For example, the use of open-end tests instead of the use of the testing system with close-ended with the multiple choice questions. 29 in average respondents believe that assessment technologies have changed. Educators use more formative assessment techniques now and more regular, or they use more regular techniques, but in the electronic or digitized form. And roughly 10% of respondents see no changes in the assessment strategies and techniques. 89% of respondents estimate that the time spent of the assessment procedures of any form in the emergency digital learning format has been increased overall. Dimension 2 of inquiry and the comparison and contrast of traditional and formative assessment formats and techniques and practices in the digital learning context. And this dimension of inquiry yielded the following results. The following dominant techniques of regular assessment in the digital format are assessed as follows. The dominant would be tests, practical tests, oral answer or interview via a video conferencing or any other digital conferencing system, a written answer and essay also submitted in the digital form. The priority techniques of assessment customized for the formative type in the digital format are estimated as follows. The educational workflow assessment by a professor or an expert with the help of specific digital tools. The peer-to-peer assessment by students, also facilitated by digital tools, and self-assessment by students, facilitated by various types of digital technology. The major advantages of regular assessment in the digital format are listed as follows. The evaluation of tests by a professional expert, the expertise, the verification of the learning proficiency, the precise identification of errors that provides for learning from one's own mistakes, that would be facilitated by the grammar or spell checks or the immediate feedback that is being inbuilt into the testing systems and so on, chatbots as well. The advantages of formative assessment techniques in the digital format are estimated as follows. The possibility to detect generic mistakes through peer-to-peer analysis, the amplified transparency of assessment, the inspiration derived from the peer-to-peer assessment to improve one's own workflow and progress. Also, dimension 3 of this inquiry concentrated on the disclosure of specific ICT tools and customized digital skills that were implemented through different forms of assessment in the digital emergency context. As per the priority ranking, the digital tools that were incorporating both regular and formative assessment modes were estimated as follows: the video conference meetings, the closed-ended online test questions, open-ended online test questions, email, of course, Google Documents, and learning management systems. Alternately, the ICT tools, the digital tools that were specifically customized for the formative assessment practices were identified as follows: the guiding questions, the outline questionnaires, the criteria checklists and tables, all implemented through a digital service or digital platform, the reflection practices via online synchronous and asynchronous means, and the online project assessment and online feedback surveys. And lastly, but not leastly, this survey disclosed the approach to boosting and stimulating various types of soft skills that are derivative of the functional, applicable, and popular paradigm of skills that are developed by the European Commission, that are developed by various global institutions. Those would be the 21st century skills, the skills of the future paradigm, and the global skills 2025 scope. Those skills are soft in nature, but they're interoperable with digital literacy. They are interoperable with digital skill sets. And of course, they're utilized through digital means in order to implement various modes of assessment. So the results that have been yielded by this particular node of the study are as follows: the soft skills that are assessed as dominant for regular assessment practices would be communication, learning, time management, and research. The dominant soft skills customized for formative assessment in the digital format would be innovation, digital literacy, collaboration, and project management. Overall, the following recommendations can be derived for the successful implementation of the formative assessment techniques and tools in the digital learning format. Assessment through discussion requires implementation of such digital tools as services as online learning materials, email discussions and messengers, discussion groups, discussion forums, whiteboards, web conferencing tools, both synchronous and asynchronous. Assessment through inquiry requires implementation of such digital tools and services as the use of online information and recommendations, analysis of ideas and information in various digital resources, use of digital tools for data collection and analysis, comparison of digital texts, use of digital tools for search and evaluation of information and ideas. Task-based assessment requires implementation of such digital techniques and services as the use of modeling, micro-worlds, online simulators, virtual laboratories and excursions, role-playing games online. Assessment through product development requires implementation of such digital tools as creation and storage of digital documents, presentation of projects, performances, artifacts, cartoons, modals, resources, slideshows, photos, videos, blogging, or a creation of an e-portfolio. The results of this inquiry can be further elaborated in evaluation of digital tools efficiency and applicability of digital skills for different groups of assessment activities and participants, for educators, for students, for administrative staff. The combinatory modes of assessment in digital learning environments at different degrees of complexity has the potential to be further investigated for separate types of university programs, both liberal arts, STEM, and STEAM. Thank you for your attention.